Hello and welcome. Let's speak honestly. When talking about retro hardware, we are thinking about retro gaming most of the time, true? And what belongs to gaming as much as water into the sea? Joysticks, gamepads, and so on. In the end of 80s and early 90s, game developers were keen to finally integrate 3D graphics into their games. Unfortunately, the computers were still not fast enough to render a full-scale 3D game as it was possible a couple of years later. However, there was one area which was a bit easier to visualize with the given hardware. Various flight and space combat simulators, and so a lot of such games flooded the market. Elite, Wing Commander Series, F-117A, X-Wing, TIE Fighter, and so on and so on. All those games were best playable with an analog joystick, which suddenly belonged to every gaming computer back then, and today I would like to talk about one of these forgotten pearls. The Gravis Analog Pro. This joystick was kind of special among all the others, and I would like to show you why. I found this one on eBay some time ago, and it was obviously really well used. It is actually quite disgusting. The stick itself is dirty and sticky. The whole joystick is covered with dirt and the rubber feet are ripped off. You already can see some interesting switches on the left, and under the joystick there is this big gray ring and some holes with screws in it. Well, and what is the best way to learn something about a piece of hardware? Right, by taking a look at its guts. So let's disassemble this joystick, clean it inside out, and talk a bit about why it is so special. To disassemble the joystick, you need to unscrew 8 screws underneath. These 4 screws in the middle hold the stick and all the surrounding mechanics in place. The other 4 screws right under the feet are holding the case together. If you want, just open the case, but don't want to disassemble the joystick completely, you need only to remove these 4 screws located under the feet. Yeah, and here we go. You can see the mechanics of the most interesting features of the joysticks right away. This gray ring can be rotated to set up the tension of the stick. This feature is quite unique. Let's see how it works. Inside of the ring there are 4 pistons which are pressing against the base of the stick to hold it upright. These pistons are each on a spring with a steel ball which is pressing against the gray ring. As you see, this ring has some steps on the inner side, and if you rotate it, the steps will press the pistons together towards the middle point, making the joystick stiffer or softer. And this is the main mechanics. They move up and down, left and right, like so, dependent from the movement of the stick. And the pistons are located here, pressing against the middle point like that. It is impossible to remove the top cover like that, because the button is in the way. You have to remove it first. There is a small latch which you can push down using a small screwdriver or tweezers like I do. Then you can just slide it down like that, and after that the stick should be narrow enough to pass through the hole. And here you have 2 variable resistors which are used to control analog access positions. The 2 screws are accessible through the side holes and can be used to readjust the middle point of the joystick, like it was very common for analog joysticks back in the days. To be able to remove the stick from the base, I have to unsolder these cables, which are used for the buttons on the top of the stick. I'm going to wash all the plastic parts, but the PCB in these internals were not exposed and are quite clean, so I will not disassemble them further and just clean it a little bit using a brush. All the other parts are going into soapy water. I didn't disassemble the stick completely because I would have to strip off the rubber handle, which I'm afraid to damage, since I believe it is glued. But I think it's not necessary. After soaking in warm water for about 20 minutes, I washed everything with a sponge and even more soap. I also removed the rests of the old rubber feet as much as I could. Some acetone did the trick eventually. After drying everything on the heater, it is time to reassemble the joystick. I add some silicone grease to the mechanics to make it better sliding. Also, some dioxide on the contacts wouldn't harm. And here are the pistons back in place, and the ring to control the tension. To keep the buttons in place, I will use a piece of tape. And here it is. Now, where the joystick is no more disgusting to touch, I can show you a little bit how it works. Here, as you can see, when I move the stick, it obviously has some tension and goes back into the middle as soon as I let it go. Here is this ring to control the tension. You can see it from the other side as well. If I turn it counterclockwise once, you can see how the stick loses all the tension and falls to the side. As you can see in this setting, the joystick remains in the position where it was left and doesn't jump back into the center. Now I turn the tension ring once clockwise and we are getting the same tension as before. The joystick jumps back now, but it is very, very soft. If I turn the ring further, the tension gets harder and harder. In my opinion, in the highest setting, it is far too hard. I prefer a setting somewhere in the middle, but I guess it's a matter of taste. Here you have a hole through which you can turn the screws to calibrate internal resistors. You have two holes, one for the X and one for the Y axis. What else? This red wheel on the left is additional axis, which can be used in the games, for example, as throttle or whatever you want it to be. And there are these gray switches left and right from the red one. This is another very unique feature of this joystick. In modern USB joysticks, the buttons can be reassigned in the drivers, but back then in DOS, there were no drivers and such things. Buttons on all joysticks were hardwired and you could have up to 4 of them. On this joystick, however, you can use these switches to reassign the two buttons located on the base of the joystick. The switches have 4 positions for each button, 1, 2, 3 and 4. So if you want, you could reassign the buttons as you like, dependent on the game and preferences, without drivers or any other additional software. These features of reassigning the buttons and setting joystick tension make this device quite unique for the time it was released, and I hope you understand now why I was interested to get one. Last important thing left is to add new feet, otherwise the joystick will slide across the table and will be unpleasant to use. I found these black silicone stands which perfectly fit into the related places. With these stands, the joystick remains in place like it would be nailed to the surface. It feels really good to use now. And apropos use, I guess it is time to test it now a little bit. What do you think? I connect the joystick to my notebook where I have DOSBox running Descent. It is one of those games which makes a lot of sense to play it with joystick. So let's give it a try. And as you see, it works just fine. And I have to say, this game still makes a lot of fun, especially with some proper gaming equipment. But wait, did you notice something strange? No? I used an old 15-pin GamePort joystick to play a game on my Core i5 notebook, which actually doesn't have a GamePort at all. How's that possible? Well, I would like to use this video to introduce my new DIY project. It's a game port adapter to convert good old joysticks to USB ports of a modern PC. In my next video, I'm going to introduce it in details and announce this project officially. So if you still have some old but beloved joysticks in your basement and you are curious how you could use them again, please feel free to join me in the next video. And for this time, this was it. I hope I could give you some interesting insights in this unique joystick and explain why I was curious to play with it. Please don't forget to leave your feedback in form of likes, dislikes and or comments. I would be glad to know if you had this Gravis Analog Pro joystick in the past and what you think about it. And so far, thank you and goodbye.